the film festival reached out to see if I wanted to be involved with this since I covered it for so long. Okay, so, well, we're on Facebook now, and welcome to everyone to the Woods Hole Film Festival, this year being done remotely, which of course the downside is everybody doesn't get to gather in wonderful Woods Hole or go to the Captain Kidd or whatever, which is always a lot of fun every year. But the plus side is that some filmmakers that maybe wouldn't ordinarily be able to get here are here virtually. So that's really exciting that we get to talk to more filmmakers by doing this remotely. We have the filmmakers for 3 short films that are going to be playing at the festival. And I've seen them, and they're all excellent movies. And I really, really suggest that you go out and look at where these, which short film groupings these films are in, and definitely check these out because they're all cream of the crop and a great example of the artistry of short film. So what I'd like to have everyone who's here introduce themselves and say what your connection to your movie is, and and who you are, and maybe also just a quick description of your movie, what it's about. So why don't we start with the woman under the tree, and we have 3 people, I believe, from that film, 2 in the same screen, which is cool. Could we start maybe with Karishma?
Yes. Hi. So I'm the director of The Woman Under the Tree. I live in Mumbai, India, and a little bit about myself. I've just last year I directed a web series called Mentalhood, which is basically motherhood that leads to mentalhood. And that's where Prashant, who's the producer writer, Prashant and Bobby were the producer writers of The Woman Under the Tree. He came and he worked with me. Prashant came down to India and worked with me on my web series. And I post that he went back to Miami, and Bobby and Prashant wrote this amazing script and asked me if I would be interested in directing it. So I found myself in Miami, and they managed to put this amazing crew together, and we shot the film, and I flew back to India then. So the script really touched my heart because, again, in India, The Woman Under the Tree is about a homeless woman that lives in Miami and watches a family from across the street. Now, in India, that's very common, actually. We drive and we stop at a signal, and you'll have not 1, not 2, but many homeless people that come up to us, right? So that for me really touched my heart. I said, okay, this is I've seen characters, I've seen women, I've seen children, I've seen men in my country all over the place at all times. So I could relate to this lady. But for her, it was, again, I don't want to give out what the film is about, and you watched it. So it has 2 sides. I mean, either that could be her family, or it could be a family that she wants to belong to. And that's a question that always is in my head. Every time I see someone, I'm, in my car and I see a homeless person that comes and, knocks on the window and is looking at me, I'm always wondering, they must be thinking that, how is that she's sitting in that car and I'm standing out here? Like, what have we done? Like, what good has she done? And I ask myself the same question, like, how come I'm sitting in here and this person's standing out? And then you go back to karma, and I don't even know if karma really exists. So for me, the script, the story really, it hit my heart, touched my soul. So I said, yeah, I'm please, I would love to direct it. So yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I wonder how many people, when they look out of their car window, whether they take the time to even have your consciousness about other people and you know, or whether they just look at sometimes at a homeless person as, you know, an annoyance if they're asking for money or
Right.
or don't look at them and hear instead. And maybe that's one of the things filmmakers do is they look at people and places that maybe most people are maybe afraid to look at, and you certainly.
I mean, it's almost like, I mean, I shouldn't say it like, I shouldn't say this, that a filmmaker is always looking for a story, because somewhere then we get very selfish and that's how we see it. But I think as filmmakers, anything, like even if there was a bird to come and sit on the window and you're sitting there, you will think of a story automatically, thinking, you know, where's the bird flown from? Where is she going to fly out now to? So I think there's definitely a beauty in filmmaking, but we're also always looking for stories and inspiration. So yeah.
Well, anyway, that's great. Roberto and Prashant, would you like to say hi and tell us a little about yourselves? You're also, you know, with the film. You wrote the screenplay for the film.
Correct.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Roberto, Bobby, either one.
I'm Prashant. Nice to meet you guys.
Yes, so we're both we co-wrote the script and we produced it and did everything in between. And it just touching on what Karishma said earlier, you know, it was really interesting for our perspective because as Karishma mentioned, this is the story of a woman that lives in South Beach, you know, in the middle of the mist and glamour and the vacation hotspot and the partying, and we actually have a large homeless population here in Miami, in South Beach, which a lot of people don't know about, because what happens is there's so much going on that they just kind of start fading into the background, right? And this population gets lost, and because of such a mobile community in Miami of people coming and going all the time, that's something that always struck us, because we are local South Beach residents. I've been here for 15 years, but has been here for 25 or so. So that was our approach. Somebody in another festival asked us, well, why did you pick South Beach? You know, you could have gone to downtown Miami. You could have gone to so many other places where homeless people live. Sorry, and that was the idea, to kind of showcase that, you know, people have these perceptions and assumptions, right? It's the stereotypes of what Miami is like and what South Beach is like, and we wanted to present the story that is less visible within that that framework. So,
What a beautiful! I was really struck by the atmosphere of you know, like you really could feel like you were sitting there with her, and just it's. I've never been to Miami Beach, but boy, it looked beautiful. Yeah.
Well, now you have a reason to visit.
Yeah, really. Okay. Well, thank you. So why don't we go to Dan next with the writer and director of X Disposer.
Hey, that's me. I'm Daniel Ferrer, writer director of X Disposer. It's a story that I'd been working on for some time, just about mental health and toxic masculinity and art. And I know a lot about the first two, and I know enough about the third one to get by. And yeah, my good friend Amelia produced it and made everything possible. And yeah, that's
Can you briefly describe in some ways, I hate to ask this question. It's sort of like if you know, it's, what's it about? Because it's about a lot of things beyond the surface, but can you just say very briefly what, you know?
Well, on a very superficial level, it's about this drummer with a severe anxiety disorder who is sort of gets kicked out of his band when he has a mental breakdown, and is many years later trying to, not many years later, it's 2 years, I believe, and he tries to reunite with the band, and I don't know, you find out why exactly he got kicked out and why the bad blood exists.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Sam. We have Amelia too, who is the producer. Amelia, could you introduce yourself, even though I just introduced you?
I love that. I can do a dual introduction.
Okay.
I'm Amelia Sittler. I'm the producer of X Disposer. Daniel is a good friend, and we decided to go on this wild journey together.
Where are you guys based, and where did you meet?
Well, right now I'm in Richmond, Virginia because of quarantine, but we met at film school in Montclair, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
And this was actually Daniel's senior thesis for undergrad. So,
Wow.
which was
Wow.
great experience. That's why, no, it's a huge community project. And I was drawn to it just because Daniel and I had met in an experimental film class the year prior, and we were nice to each other. We were friendly, but it was only the semester, like I had graduated, and I was just sort of nosy and trying to figure out what the new seniors were up to. And I came across Daniel's script, and I had been reading coverage for, as like a day job, and just something about Daniel's like 17, 16 pages. I was like, I need to make this. And I'm so glad that I persuaded him to let me do it. But yeah, no, that's sort of just the journey, I guess, that
Sure.
There's one part of the story that she's leaving out, which I really love, is that she was the assistant to my thesis professor.
Yeah.
And she had to read everybody's scripts.
Yeah.
And I don't think she was allowed to do this, but she read mine and then called me up and said, let me make this.
Yeah, I really forgot what I went on, honestly.
It seems like it's a pretty good thing to do.
Yeah.
It was a great exercise. I don't have to go to grad school now. Like, I know how to film.
Well, making this maybe was grad school, right?
That's what I'd say. But it's funny, we kind of try to downplay it depending on who we're talking with, because some people, I don't know, it's just like the film itself, obviously, it speaks a lot of like we're older, and a lot of our crew, we were able to kind of bridge, at least from a production side, bridge a gap between like people fresh out of school and maybe a little bit more like amateur, with people who were older and had already like a few films out of their belt. So everything has just sort of been this, I don't know, it's an exciting process that we don't get to talk about a lot. Because
it sounds like quite the win-win.
Yeah.
Well, it was because of the results, that's for sure.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so we also have writer-director Christina Yoon from Mirror, and Christina and Young Yoon.
It's Jung Yoon, actually.
Oh, Jung Yoon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Jung Yoon Kim from Mirror. Christina, would you like to tell us a little bit in your film?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, I'm Christina. I am a writer and director based in New York, but I'm from Atlanta. I'm currently in Atlanta because of the coronavirus. And the film is about a Korean immigrant with a scarred face who is dealing with self-image issues, self-esteem issues, and finally decides to get plastic surgery at a black market hospital in Queens. So it kind of follows her journey towards trying to find some form of self-acceptance and dealing with the potential loss of identity, which is something that, just coming from personal experience, having spent some years in Korea, is something that I was starting to feel with the beauty standards there. And I mean, that's basically what the film is about.
The beauty standards there, how are they compared to here?
They're immense. I mean, you can't apply for a job without putting your headshot. That's the standard. You can't go out on the street without every girl being made up at the grocery store, train station, of any age. That's the standard. You're judged, especially women are judged by their appearances for job positions, and just, you know, how someone treats you will be based, especially by the men in the culture, will be based on how you look. And that pressure is so immense that so many women go out and get plastic surgery at a very young age to try to fit that standard. And it's something that, as a Korean American who was not born and raised in Korea, when I was living there, I started to feel that pressure, and I started to feel that I was losing a sense of myself in needing to, you know, conform to be a certain way for others. And it's something that stayed with me. And I mean, there's so many things I love about Korea and Korean culture, and that I think are in many ways better than American culture. But that's one thing that I was like, you know, this kind of needs to be questioned. And the way that's dealt with it needs to be questioned, you know. It's like sort of a band-aid to just, oh, I hate the way I look, I'm gonna go get all the surgery done, instead of, you know, trying to heal internally the self-hatred that you have for yourself. So that's kind of what I was exploring here.
Yeah, well, you did it in an amazing way. There's not to give anything away, but I mean, there's certainly, as you were talking, I was thinking about one scene in your movie where she's walking through the black market hospital, and you just see some of the patients, one after another in rooms with their faces wrapped up. And it's such a disturbing series of images, because you wonder, I mean, it seems like you get the sense that it's unnecessary what they're probably doing to themselves, and it's all cosmetic, and you know, it almost seems like you know, sort of self-inflicted wounds. But anyway, great. Jung Yoon, first of all, I don't know what's in the background there, but it looks amazing. Where are you?
This is just Monsters Inc. Backdrop there. You know, one of my favorite movies.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm such an idiot. I actually thought, wow, he has a really cool place to live.
Oh, and this is not my home, by the way.
Oh yeah, that person isn't moving behind you, and I thought the same thing with you. Anyway, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to the film, Jung Yoon?
Sure. Yeah, and so Christina and I met during film school. We go to Columbia MFA. I actually just recently graduated. And so sort of similar to what Christina had mentioned, for me, I was born and raised in Korea. And so I was conformed for sure of what I was supposed to think as a man in the Korean society, and how I should look at, you know, beauty. And I think truthfully, I sort of really started to ask questions probably in my, you know, early mid-20s. And the story just was something that I could immediately connect to, and something that I wanted to immediately offer to the table as a producer was the male gaze. The film has a very specific sort of gaze to what a woman should be, you know, and should look like. And without trying to give everything away, you know, because our main protagonist, she has this, you know, disfigured sort of side of her face that she's actually trying to remove, in which, you know, through this assistant, who was a guy, he sort of asks questions about, you know, what he thinks beauty means, working, you know, in a sort of that kind of an environment. And that was something that I think I wanted to really help bring out to the, you know, in the film, just because I think once when you're in sort of in that sort of group of similar mindset, right? And then you sort of yourself try to break out of that. You do really ask yourself, okay, like what is beautiful to me? And that's something that we also wanted to emphasize in the film, and that hopefully when people watch it, they get to at least see a little bit of that
and think about it themselves on their own perceptions and how they've been sort of conditioned to think
right
of beauty, even if people say, oh well, beauty's only skin deep, but really does that do they live their lives thinking that way, or are they affected by the superficial, and how are they? One thing I found really interesting is that you talked about the male, both of you, about male perceptions, yet a lot of the film in the very beginning you hear women's voices, and I imagine you really get the sense that it's the female perception or perspective, and maybe that's because in reaction to the male.
Yeah, it's so deeply ingrained
Yeah.
in the women there, and it was in me as well. When I was out there, I didn't really understand how destructive it could be when I was first there. I was just like, wow, everyone's beautiful and everyone looks nice. That's fine, that's great. And it took some time for me to realize how deeply ingrained it was, where people were like, oh, I have like smaller eyes and therefore I'm ugly and I need to fix it. And it's just, it wasn't even a question, which I, think is something to think about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing, and I'm not just saying this because you guys are in this room, but in all three of your films, you deal with themes that have been dealt with in various ways before, but you all of you deal with them not in obvious ways, and you find a certain way of dealing with the subject that I haven't quite seen before. For example, with the woman under the tree, we've seen movies maybe with some homeless characters, but but getting inside the head of somebody who's homeless and forming connections that is sort of in the invisible theme that some people might not even be aware of, that that connection to this doesn't give anything away because it's right in the beginning of the film, but this homeless person she's sitting under a tree and watching this family and feeling a very strong connection to this family, but of course most people wouldn't realize that that's what something like that would be going on, and that she has this whole interior life. Well, you already discussed to some degree what inspired these stories, Daniel, can you talk a little more about like have you been in the hardcore scene, or what kind of did you have a personal connection in some way to the story too? You mentioned you could relate to two of the three themes.
So there's actually I mean it was originally supposed to take place within the like New Brunswick basement scene, which is a very I completely forgot the word. But it's the underground music community here in New Jersey, and I was never a part of it, but I had many friends who were, and as such, I ended up floating around these places.
And what exactly is it? What it sounds like? Where it's
people it's underground music in literal underground places. So it ended up being more about centered around Montclair, which is where it was shot. But it it is about sort of my experience, not necessarily being a part of that scene, but certainly I don't know, my experience of it, of somebody who was very passionate about punk rock and music, but would then at the time in my life was suffering from really severe social avoidance and
Oh,
agoraphobia, and could not quite handle the experience of being in a crowd of people. Uh,
wow.
and there is that sort of conflict that's in there, and Andy, our main character, is actually a drummer in one of those bands and has that same problem, so it's a little
Right.
more complicated for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's and this certainly won't give anything away, but there's a speech. Well, speech is probably a bad word to use. I don't know, but it's kind of a speech though, where he's describing his feelings, sort of finally, that he's finally describing. And again, it was an eye opener. It was. It was pretty powerful of the idea of the weight, and I won't go into and the effect it has on the person, and it's not quite what's expected when the character talks about the weight he feels, and it's so revealing, and so clearly you had you were providing information that I think would be very helpful to people who watch this movie for a much greater understanding of what he goes through.
Yeah, and that was definitely the goal. I mean, you were talking about this theme of the invisible. It's in my case, it was I very specifically wanted to portray mental illness in a way that I didn't feel was represented, that didn't feel
Right.
true to my experience, and that had to do with one of the criticisms a lot of people have about the movie, both when I was writing it and after I finished it, was that they don't understand anything about Andy, like where he comes from or why he is this
Right.
way.
Right.
And I think that really is just a really flawed understanding of what mental health is, that it doesn't really come from a thing that happened to you. It is like a disease. And I really wanted it to be focused on the actual mechanics of that illness and the day-to-day experiences that he has, rather than where it comes from or what may or may not trigger it. Yeah.
Well, that's what makes it it's a challenging film, and I mean that in the best sense. It doesn't spoon feed the moviegoer the information, and it's definitely, boy, talk about the right choice as far as not having to provide a whole. I mean, there are flashbacks where you get information that's relevant to that particular situation,
Right.
but it's sort of, I suppose the movie is sort of saying, look, we, in all these cases, whether it's the central character in Mirror or the central character in The Woman Under the Tree or your film, we don't look at somebody and see how they're behaving and have an awareness of their background. And most people, unlike Karishma, don't even take the time to think that those people have a background. and what I think all of you do so well in all three of these films is provide the moviegoer with that information, and really, and this sounds probably hokey, but they're the better for it. All three are very I think extraordinary films in that way. And Daniel, your film is, I think, very challenging, it's provocative, and it's sort of like, I'm glad if it makes people uncomfortable, and I'm sure you are too, because
I love making people uncomfortable. Yes.
well, I mean, that's a good thing. That's a good thing in if you're trying to sort of get people to think. Thinking can be uncomfortable, right? Anyway, so how about as far as, I mean, we've we've touched on it, but maybe we could talk a little more about the notion of the invisible. And granted, this is a label that that John put on these films, like so that he could group them, but they certainly apply to all of your films in very different ways. Is there anything you'd like to say about that or address that in terms of your films? How about you, Karishma? Would you like to start that? Just so I'll put you on the spot. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So, you know, it's strangely, it fits our film because she is, to the world, she is invisible, you know. And we have a scene where she's actually taking her shower and she says, "Don't you see me?"
Right,
So,
right.
And coming back to our earlier conversation with because of poverty in India, and like I mentioned earlier, I'll walk down the street and I'll come across like 10 homeless people. And it's just that, like, they probably look at me like, "Don't you see me? I'm like, am I invisible?" You know, even if I'm coming to your car and asking, "It's pouring, I'm hungry, can you give me something to eat?" And knocking on the window, and some people are not even looking their way. So yes, they're made to feel invisible. And I feel that it's pretty apt for our film as well. Prashant and Bobby, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah.
So in South Beach, I used to live across the street from Flamingo Park, which is where we shot the film.
Oh.
I had this story idea in mind 20 years ago because I always seem to walk past human beings and I question their stories, or, you know, especially the broken ones like homeless people or, you know, abused people. Like, I like telling stories about people that society often just disregards or they overlook them because, you know, again, South Beach is a vanity-based city, and it's, you know, you always look for the beauty. Even the buildings are colorful. Everything is just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But amongst that beauty, you will see an Art Deco home that has chipped walls and peeling paint, and those are the real, you know, backbones of our society. And for me, finding those kind of nuggets of humanity, it's just so precious to me to see that on screen and to have compassion for those untold stories and to learn from them.
Yeah.
So it was a joy writing that, and then to have a female director take it on and give it new life, just, you know, it just mattered so much because as male writers, we didn't know how to get inside the head of a homeless woman, and
Right.
to take that and bring it to the next level for us, and it just evolved so beautifully, and I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Was that coincidence, or did you actively seek a female director?
I gravitate more towards female direction. I like that. And I've known Karishma forever, and I just work really well with her. And I know that we can argue things out. We can fight things out on set and get everything done and, you know, discuss each other's opinions and have the final product brought to life. So Karishma being a female definitely was a plus.
Yeah.
But there was also an element of, you know, we to some level, I guess we could say we were biased because we live in South Beach, and you know, we had endless discussions day in and day out about all sorts of things that are, you know, daily life, and homelessness was one of them. So we definitely came with a very specific view when writing, but it was just very refreshing to have a take of obviously a female director that could better understand the character probably, but also someone who doesn't live in South Beach. She's spent time in South Beach, but she's never lived here. So it was an outsider, and what to the point that she made earlier, an outsider coming from India, where, you know, homelessness is taken to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Not that it's, you know, more or less important. It's just different how we perceive homelessness depending on our surroundings. So that it was just the collaboration process was awesome.
Yeah.
The homeless in the homeless in Miami compared to India are rich. Okay, the homeless in India are homeless. You know, here she had a cart and she had value. She had things. India, you're not going to find that.
Yeah,
Wow.
having a shopping cart in India for a homeless person would be a luxury, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
simple things like that. So
Yeah, that's it's interesting, and it's interesting, Karishma, not having been, the choice of somebody, an outsider looking in for, fresh eyes. Again, the setting is so much a part of the story. I felt. I mean, I just again, I looked at that section. I go, wow, I want to move there. Maybe have a house, not the, but,
Right.
it's a very appealing in the appropriate way view of the city, and yet it does seem that it's not heavy-handed like, oh, luxury, Fifth Avenue, New York versus homeless, that type of thing. It's subtler than that, and yet you definitely feel, the difference. And anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
So, how about you, Dan and Amelia, with your film?
Oh, what was the question? I'm so sorry.
Karishma, could you tell him what the question was?
About the invisible, Daniel.
Let's see. Now I'm trying to remember what the question was.
It was about the concept of invisible, right?
Right.
Oh, I feel like I said a little bit about that earlier. Amelia, do you have anything you want to add about it?
You
Or
know,
just-
I do. No, I've been thinking a lot about this actually, because I in this process of getting the film out, when I am the one sort of like pushing it, it's very interesting that this is a film that like seems very male heavy, and it's like I'm a woman and I'm also gay, and those are like the two type of topics I like to see in my films, and this film has none of that. But I have been thinking a lot of what drew me to even want to make this film, and it is more about having empathy for people like Andy, for people even like Daniel, just who we can attach these traits of undiagnosed mental health issues and toxic masculinity, which the film does address. And it also very clearly takes a stance on the whole idea of a sort of starving, destructive artist, and how a lot of times we try to romanticize that concept of an artist has to be suffering and struggling intensely to make profound art. And what I found for myself in this journey of just articulating this part of the process is those are key themes that really do speak to me. My involvement, just even getting the story out there, is my empathy towards these I don't know, just people who need empathy, especially we talk so many, again, these topics are huge conversations in our society, and it's hard to empathize when we see destructive behavior. And it's hard to not just make a rash judgment of stop doing that, or here's how I would fix you or change, but it's just more which we've been talking about, understanding the backgrounds of characters and people. We don't normally allow ourselves to spend that much time thinking in real life. But yeah, I just think that that idea of empathy towards my work and my involvement with Daniel, and just the film in general, I hope that when people watch it, there's more empathy with it is, again, I love what Daniel was saying earlier about how challenging the film was, which it was even for me to fully understand and concede to sort of these specific nuances that Daniel wanted to have with the edit and the choices he had, which again was a big lesson of as a producer, you just want to bring your director writer's vision to life, and it's not about you as the producer. It's not your story, even though you love it and would die for it, right? Metaphorically, but but yeah, it's the way that the specific, even like sound design choices that he,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, that he was really like, it was a battle between us. It was a battle between myself and my own perception of like what somebody in a mental health crisis, what the sound would be like, it wasn't my experience, it's Daniel's. And yeah, so I think empathy is just something that
Actually, oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, go. No, I'm good.
On the topic of the sound design, my very dear friend Will Freeman, who is the sound designer and associate producer, and lives right over here, but he had
In a closet.
this is our common room, and he had been working on a series, not a series, I think it was like 2 experimental films where he was experimenting with just sort of like looping images, and then would design these sort of like soundscapes that evoked his experience, his own experience with panic attacks. And I had asked him if he would be interested in doing something like that for the film. So that's where a lot of the more evocative choices come from. And yeah.
Wow. Did I once asked William Friedkin this about The Exorcist.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're making a movie that's really intense and you know, like I asked him, how do you day to day, how do you get up for work when you're dealing with such dark material? And I wonder, particularly in your film, Daniel, was it difficult to make this film because was it emotionally taxing because it's so intense from start to finish?
Yes and no. It certainly would have been more emotionally taxing if I did not have the privilege of crewing it with people that I was very close with. And I remember specifically on the we shot the first scene in the movie on the first day, where he's in his car and he tries to make that phone call and ends up having a bit of an outburst. And the day was going really smoothly, everyone was like having a good time hanging out and everything, and then we roll on the scene and Jack DeFalco, who does an amazing job in this film as Andy, starts absolutely unleashing himself, and the whole crew just got immediately tight-lipped and nervous and very concerned because they were not expecting this, and they were not it felt very palpable, and there were moments like that where you know, we all got very quiet and just we're like, let's just get through this. I found when I was directing, I mostly spoke directly to Jack, and let the other actors sort of just react to what he was doing. And when I was talking to Jack, I kind of it was very private and off from everyone else, and speaking at a whisper and just trying to make sure that like because I didn't know much about him, but I when you see him act like that, you sort of get concerned. I was like, yeah, you're okay, right? Like you're just good at your job, and you're not actually like
pretty good actor, right? Did he go acting?
yeah. Yeah, but it was powerful. But yeah, the fact that we were all really there to support each other, and almost everybody on the crew, whether they needed to or not, had read the script, and so they were all like very on board and supportive, and yeah,
emotionally invested.
Did you audition him? I mean, Jack, for the lead role, or did you know him before?
No, so that's actually an interesting story. Susan Skoog, who was a professor at our Montclair, who I wrote this for her class, and she was kind of a mentor of mine and Amelia's as well. And she is a experienced filmmaker in her own right, and she strongly suggested to me that I hire an experienced casting director to find the lead. We had a friend of Amelia's helped us cast the rest of the film, and she found really amazing people around the area like Kumasi and Josh Torgerson, and that do great work in the supporting cast. Jenny Tarr, who is the therapist, who is absolutely phenomenal, like perfect performance there. And there was but we she put us in touch with a casting director who she worked with before, Adrian Stern, who sent the script out to a lot of agents in the area, and when we approached her, at first she was like, "Oh, I don't do student films," and then Susan thankfully told her, "Well, read the script first," and after she read it, she was like, "Okay, I'll do this one." And then she sent it to Jack's agent, and Jack's agent was also like, "We don't do student films," and she was said, "Just read it." And he was like, "Okay." I'll send him the script, and then finally he got to Jack, who also said, "I don't do student films," and then read it, and it was like, "Okay, I'll do this." So it was yeah, no, it was we're extremely fortunate to have him.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. How about you, Christina and Jean-Yun, you know, as far as the invisibility theme, and what are your thoughts related to your film?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think it definitely applies. I mean, the character, I think, definitely feels invisible, and it is actually probably her own mindset that is causing her to feel that way. And I think a lot of women, and I've experienced this as well, especially when you're a teenager and you go through self-image issues. Sometimes it doesn't have to be external forces like you being bullied or made fun of or being pointed out to you. Sometimes it's totally internal, and it's just you know, your own perception of yourself can be warped, and that causes you to feel invisible and act even more invisible. And I think, yeah, like in the film, that's something that I wanted to point, is just how isolating and internal that experience can be. Like it can be that nobody knows what you're suffering through and how you feel. You can seem totally confident, and actually it's funny because our lead actress is so confident and outgoing and quite gregarious. And when I was talking to her about the character and the role, I was like, you know, is there something that you can connect to about from your past or yourself right now where you identify with this insecurity and this potential, you know, a seed of self-hatred in yourself? And she was like, "Oh yeah, 100%, you know, that's there, you know, that's there in the past, or whether it's in herself now." I think a lot of people, men and women, can relate to not loving a part of yourself and not loving a part of the way you look. So yeah, that's sort of how I see it in terms of invisibility.
Jeong-Yoon?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, just if I may just add a little bit more to that, I would, you know, I thought about also choice and how sometimes if you know, it's somehow if you want to, you know, stand out, you know, to create a spotlight for yourself, that seems more like a choice sometimes rather than if you want to just sort of stay hidden and just sort of just be a part of a bigger society. And I think one of the biggest difference, you know, from an American society to a Korean society is, you know, Korea by nature is much more of a collective society, and people sort of all kind of, you know, it's a big community sort of in its own way about how people think, and it's very homogenous. People kind of think very alike. Whereas I think America, it thrives in this idea of individualism. and that, you know, it's actually very important that, you know, to emphasize. And I think the First Amendment speaks for that. You know, and so, you know, you take a Korean immigrant to, you know, in a country like America, you know, that was something that we really wanted to explore a little bit more in a genre sort of style, and how, and what that means, you know, and how does her view sort of play out in, you know, in this world of Queens. And interesting enough, a lot of, you know, some people that had seen the film had never even thought that that was America. They thought that that was Korea, you know, and so that was, I guess, a good thing. But, you know, of course, you know, that's New York as well. You know, you have so many different areas, you know, in this big city where, you know, you really see various cultures. And so, you know, interesting enough, you know, our character, I think, kind of wanted to do the opposite, right? You know, she wanted to sort of go back to the status quo. You know, she felt like she, you know, her scar kind of kept her sort of always to be, you know, to create this unintended, you know, spotlight for herself. And kind of that was sort of the, I think, the little twist that we wanted to have, you know, and, you know, in the film, you know, it talks about mediocrity, you know, the standard of beauty. Like, why do you want to choose mediocrity? And that was something that we really wanted to, you know, to stand by. You know, is sometimes, you know, people don't want to settle for less in beauty. You know, if you want to advance your, you know, improve your beauty, like, why don't you just go all the way and just make everything bigger? You know, and you know, and so yeah, that's kind of, I think, something that we wanted to really definitely explore in the theme of invisibleness, or invisible, for sure.
She's also kind of literally invisible in that she wears a mask. and it's not it's weird because it's, you know, she's wearing a mask literally and figuratively, but I really think you pull that off where it doesn't seem a heavy-handed symbol at all, and yet it's so there when you think about it in terms of invisibility. She's
right.
seeing herself, and you know, one thing I you know, and I think this is a compliment to you, is she seems very beautiful. You know, well, I don't want to give away anything, but there's a real beauty that you see at the end of the film, and then I don't know how you pulled that off, but you did. Well, it's time to say goodbye. I've really enjoyed this, and thanks for putting up with me. But you guys are wonderful, and really, I'm not just saying this. Your movies are so impressive, and clearly what you guys have talked about in terms of what you were trying to do, you did, and people will be the better for seeing your movies. So I really hope people go out and see them. They're great, and the movies again are Mirror, Ex Disposer, and The Woman Under the Tree. So please, people out there on Facebook, please make sure you see these films. Thanks again for, you know, it was an honor talking to you.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Come to Woods Hole sometime.
We
Would
can't
love
wait.
to.
We can't.
Next year.
Bye.